As the conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo intensifies, a new regional war could break out at any moment. While the Chinese people were celebrating the 2025 Lunar New Year, the United Nations issued a war warning for the DRC, a country in the heart of Central Africa. In less than a month at the start of the year, over 400,000 people in the eastern DRC have already been displaced by fighting. With the conflict escalating, the UN has begun evacuating its personnel and has convened an Emergency Security Council meeting to discuss the situation. But if the chaos in the DRC could be so easily resolved, the country wouldn't have been in a state of turmoil from its founding to the present day. At least in the short term, there is little hope for its future. How did this country, with its fertile land, abundant natural resources, a history of large-scale kingdoms, and, in modern times, the discovery of massive mineral reserves, become one of the poorest and most unstable nations on Earth? The DRC is located in the equatorial heart of Central Africa. The Congo River flows through its entire territory, and its eastern border is dotted with numerous large lakes, including Lake Tanganyika, the world's second deepest. With excellent conditions for agriculture, the local population began farming as early as 1000 BC, and by the 11th century, early agricultural settlements had formed at the mouth of the Congo River. In the latter half of the 14th century, a leader conquered the scattered tribes and established the unified Kingdom of Congo. By the time the Portuguese arrived in the late 15th century, the kingdom had expanded to 6 provinces with a population of about 3 million and a standing army of over 80,000. But this was where the glory of the Kingdom of Congo came to an end. The Portuguese, armed with the tools of industrial civilization, began to aggressively purchase slaves. The king was powerless to stop them, and the foundation of his rule began to crumble. The kingdom's population dwindled, while rebellious regional chiefs, who traded with the Portuguese for weapons and wealth, grew stronger. The kingdom descended into chaos. Even a king who had converted to Catholicism and ascended to the throne with Portuguese help couldn't tolerate the situation. In 1526, he wrote a letter to the King of Portugal, pleading with him to stop the slave trade. But Portugal, unsurprisingly, ignored the plea. The slave trade continued to flourish, and later, the Portuguese even violated their own treaties and invaded the kingdom. Under this relentless pressure, the once mighty Kingdom of Congo soon collapsed. At the Berlin Conference of 1884, the European powers carved up Africa. The former lands of the Kingdom of Congo were split 3 ways, with the territory of the modern-day DRC being seized by Belgium. The oppression and plunder under Belgian colonial rule were horrific. In just over 20 years, an estimated 10 million Congolese died, half of the country's total population at the time. The only reason the Belgians were able to maintain their brutal rule was the profound disunity among the local Congolese people. It was only under pressure from the US and the Soviet Union, who were working together to dismantle the old colonial systems, that Belgium finally agreed in 1960 to negotiate with local political parties and grant the Congo its independence. Although the independence process was rushed, and the new government and its mining-based economy remained heavily influenced, if not controlled, by Belgium, the new nation was still the second largest country in Africa, with a land area of 2.3 million square kilometers and incredibly rich mineral reserves. If it had been allowed to develop peacefully and gradually shed its colonial legacy, the DRC could have easily become a relatively wealthy country just by selling its natural resources. Unfortunately, Western powers had long had their eyes on this land. The country's vast mineral wealth, instead of becoming the foundation for its development, became the source of its people's suffering. Even before independence, Western mining companies had already established a foothold, extracting resources at extremely low costs. So when the new government began to reform the army and administration,
replacing Belgian officials with locals and showing a nationalist bent, these companies grew nervous. They feared the government's next move would be to renegotiate mining contracts, demand a larger share of the profits, or even nationalize the mines. To protect their interests, and even expand them, these mining companies struck first. They backed local secessionist movements. With their support, the provinces of Katanga and Kasai declared independence, sparking a conflict with the central government. At the same time, Belgium, the former colonial ruler, which had assumed that Congolese independence would be in name only, was enraged by the reforms. It sent troops to attack the DRC, occupying several major towns. Facing foreign invasion and national fragmentation, the fledgling Congolese government was powerless. It appealed to the international community for help. But with the Cold War in full swing, the U.S. was bound to support its capitalist ally, Belgium, and the Soviet Union had no interest in expending resources on a non-socialist African nation. So, while the UN sent peacekeepers, it took no action against Belgium or the secessionists. Desperate, the country's prime minister, Patrice Lumumba, tried to turn to the Soviet Union for support. But before he could secure any real commitment, the U.S., enraged by his pro-Soviet leanings, backed a coup led by the Army's Chief of Staff, Mobutu Sese Seko. After Mobutu seized power, the U.S., seeing that he was a staunch anti-communist, helped him crush the rebellions and stabilize his regime.
With stability came a period of prosperity, fueled by the country's rich resources. But it didn't last. Soon, Mobutu, like so many other U.S.-backed strongmen, revealed his true nature as a corrupt and brutal dictator. He became known as one of Africa's three great tyrants. While the economy was good, his corruption was tolerable. But in the mid-1970s, a drop in global copper prices sent the DRC's mineral-dependent economy into a crisis. Public discontent with Mobutu's regime exploded, and armed resistance groups began to emerge, some of them even stronger than the government's own army. But with U.S. backing, Mobutu managed to hold on to power and launched a brutal crackdown, which only fueled more opposition. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Mobutu lost his strategic value to the U.S., which then began to pressure him to democratize. This shattered the country's fragile balance. Even with UN mediation, the opposition launched a civil war in 1997. The war quickly drew in neighboring countries like Rwanda and Uganda, who intervened to back different factions, and, in the process, plundered the DRC's mineral wealth to fund their own development. This great African war, centered in the DRC, raged for 6 years before a fragile ceasefire was brokered by the international community. But even after the agreement was signed, small-scale armed conflicts have continued to erupt. Warlords and foreign powers are still fighting over the country's mineral resources and the immense profits they bring. This endless conflict has made the already difficult lives of ordinary Congolese people even harder. War has repeatedly destroyed their homes and taken their lives, leaving them with no hope for the future. Even though there is money to be made in this resource-rich land, foreign companies are still willing to brave the risks to mine here, providing many well-paying, low-skilled jobs. The Congolese people seem to have little desire to work and improve their lives. In the slums, you see people sitting around idly. Their homes are flimsy shacks made of branches and plastic bags that couldn't withstand a stiff breeze. If these people had even a shred of hope for a better life, they wouldn't be living like this. Perhaps it's because, in their minds, any home they build could be destroyed by war at any moment, and they might never get to enjoy the fruits of their labor. So why not live for today? But this self-defeating mindset also means they have given up on any hope of moving up in the world.
Perhaps only when the fighting stops will the social fabric of the DRC begin to heal. But the spoils of war are too tempting. The various factions that have profited from the chaos are unlikely to give up their gains easily. The road to peace in the Congo is long and difficult, and there is no end in sight to the suffering of its people.